Hey everybody, ChristopherOdd here. Welcome to the first Mass Effect CODEX video, in which we're going to go through a lot of the entries that we have discovered since beginning the game. I do have two quick questions that I'd like to ask you guys, though. The first question is, from a roleplay perspective, it's something that I'm very new to, and frankly, I don't think I'm very good at it. But if you guys could provide some critique or things I could do to improve the roleplay aspect, that would be fantastic. The second question I have, people have been trying to clarify which strategy I should go for. So between Charm and Intimidate, which equals to Paragon or Renegade. And my understanding was that if I were to max out both, then I would have both options available to me. But I'm starting to think that, though, that doesn't really work out. So do you only get the Charm or the Paragon and the Renegade options based on the answers that you give, and then at the end of a conversation you get like the plus, you get the bonus Paragon or the bonus Renegade points that come up on the bottom right of the screen? Or is that based on your Charm and Intimidate skills? Or are those just completely separate things? If somebody could explain it to me in a way that's really clear, I could go to a wiki or something, but I'd rather get it straight from you guys. So anyways, let's go into the Codex, and I think some of these are read to us, some of them are not. Based on how much there is, I may end up breaking this into a couple of videos. We'll see how it goes, but let's jump in here. I think let's start with some primary ones. Maybe we'll go through, we'll kind of bounce back and forth between primary and secondary.
The Asari were the first species to discover the Citadel. When the Solarians arrived, it was the Asari who proposed the establishment of the Citadel Council to maintain peace throughout the galaxy. Since then, the Asari have served as the mediators and centrists of the Council. An all-female race, the Asari reproduce through a form of parthenogenesis. They can attune their nervous system to that of another individual of any gender and of any species to reproduce. This capability has led to the unseemly and inaccurate rumors about Asari promiscuity.
That's funny.
Asari can live for over 1,000 years, passing through 3 stages of life. In the maiden stage, they wander restlessly, seeking new knowledge and experience. When the matron stage begins, they meld with interesting partners to produce their offspring. This ends when they reach the matriarch stage, where they assume the roles of leaders and counselors.
That's interesting because I wonder how they choose these partners. It seems like it's just for the purposes of reproducing, while apparently there are rumors about their promiscuity too, so that is kind of cool. I didn't really even put 2 and 2 together that it was only female. I think it has been mentioned before, but that's really interesting. I think, are there other races that are like that, or we'll probably find out.
The second species to join the Citadel, the Solarians, are warm-blooded amphibians with a hyperactive metabolism. Solarians think fast, talk fast, and move fast. To Solarians, other species seem sluggish and dull-witted. Unfortunately, their metabolic speed leaves them with a relatively short lifespan. Solarians over the age of 40 are a rarity. The Solarians were responsible for advancing the development of the primitive Krogan species to use as soldiers during the Rachni Wars. They were also behind the creation of the genophage bioweapon the Turians used to quell the Krogan rebellions several centuries later. Solarians are known for their observational capability and non-linear thinking. This manifests as an aptitude for research and espionage. They are constantly experimenting and inventing, and it is generally accepted that they always know more than they are letting on.
Okay, so these guys are almost the complete opposite of the Asari. They only live till like 40 is really rare, basically. While the Asari can live for over 1,000 years. Like, that's crazy.
The second species to join the... Roughly 1,200 years ago, the Turians were invited to join the Citadel Council to fulfill the role of galactic peacekeepers. The Turians have the largest fleet in Citadel space, and they make up the single largest portion of the Council's military forces. As their territory and influence has spread, the Turians have come to rely on the Solarians for military intelligence and the Asari for diplomacy. Despite a somewhat colonial attitude towards the rest of the galaxy, the ruling hierarchy understands they would lose more than they would gain if the other two races were ever removed. Turians come from an autocratic society that values discipline and possesses a strong sense of personal and collective honor. There is lingering animosity between Turians and humans over the First Contact War of 2157, which is known as the Relay 314 incident to the Turians. Officially, however, the two species are allies, and they enjoy civil, if cool, diplomatic relations.
So you could see each of these different races bringing something different to the table for the Council, which is cool. The Turians obviously bringing the muscle and the weaponry. Let's go through the rest of these races here. Or, like, we'll go through these first four, then we'll jump over to some secondary stuff.
50,000 years ago, the Protheans were the only spacefaring species in the galaxy. They vanished in a swift galactic extinction. Only the legacy of their empire remains. They are believed to have built the mass relays and the Citadel, which have allowed numerous species to explore and expand throughout the galaxy. Prothean ruins are found on worlds across the galaxy. While surprisingly intact for their age, functioning examples of Prothean paleotechnology are rare. Time and generations of looters have picked their dead cities and derelict stations clean. Some believe the Protheans meddled in the evolution of younger races. The Hanar homeworld of Kadje, for example, shows clear evidence of former Prothean occupation. The presence of a former Prothean observation post on Mars has caused a rebirth of interventionary evolutionists among humans. These individuals believe the god myths of ancient civilizations are misremembered encounters with aliens.
So these are the only spacefaring species in the galaxy, like 50,000 years ago. And we were talking in terms of like 1,200 years when the Turians joined the Council. So this is like, these guys are literally the dinosaurs of this era.
Though now extinct, the Rachni once threatened every species in Citadel space. Over 2,000 years ago, explorers foolishly opened a mass relay to a previously unknown system and encountered something never seen before or since, a species of spacefaring insects guided by a hive mind intelligence. Unfortunately, the Rachni were not peaceful, and the galaxy was plunged into a series of conflicts known as the Rachni Wars. Attempts to negotiate were futile, as it was impossible to make contact with the hive queens that guided the race from beneath the surface of their toxic home world. The emergence of the Krogan ended the Rachni Wars. Bred to survive the harshest environments, the Krogan were able to strike at the queens in their lairs and reclaim conquered Council worlds. But when Krogan fleets pressed them back to their homeworld, the Rachni refused to surrender, and the Krogan eradicated them from the galaxy.
Okay, so these guys came about 2,000 years ago. Well, probably before, because they opened a mass relay to this system. But I don't think we've heard anything about Rachni yet. And so some of these journal entries must be just static, they're just here. And then the Krogan basically wiped them out, so...
In the early 2160s, the Alliance began aggressive colonization of worlds in the Skyllian Verge, much to the dismay of the Batarians, who had been developing the region for several decades. In 2171, the Batarians petitioned the Council to declare the Verge a zone of Batarian interest. The Council refused, however, declaring unsettled worlds in the region open to human colonization. In protest, the Batarians closed their Citadel embassy and severed official diplomatic relations with the Council, effectively becoming a rogue state. They instigated a proxy war in the Verge by funneling money and weapons to criminal organizations, urging them to strike at human colonies. Hostilities peaked with the Skyllian Blitz of 2176, an attack on the human capital of Elysium by Batarian-funded pirates and slavers. In 2178, the Alliance retaliated with a crushing assault on the moon of Torfin, long used as a staging base by Batarian-backed criminals. In the aftermath, the Batarians retreated into their own systems and are now rarely seen in Citadel space.
So, okay, so the Torfin situation is what our Shepherd was involved in, where he led a lot of his men to death in order to get the job done. And that was against the Batarians. So are these guys... I don't imagine that they're gonna be super friendly to us if and when we run into them. In the aftermath, Batarians retreated into their own systems and rarely seen. Okay, well, they're still out there. I was thinking about the Elcor already. I love these guys.
The Elcor are a citadel species native to the high-gravity world Dakuna. They are massive creatures, standing on 4 muscular legs for increased stability. Elcor move slowly, an evolved response to an environment where a fall can be lethal. This has colored their psychology, making them deliberate and conservative. Elcor's speech is ponderous and monotone. Among themselves, scent, slight movements, and sub-vocalized infrasound convey shades of meaning that make a human smile seem as subtle as a fireworks display. Since their subtlety can lead to misunderstandings with other species, the Elcor often go out of their way to clarify when they are being sarcastic, amused, or angry. Dakuna's high gravity impedes mountain formation. Most of the world consists of flat, open plains, which prehistoric Elcor wandered across in small family bands. Modern Elcor still prefer open sky, and can become restless and uncomfortable on long starship journeys.
So like mini elephants, basically. I'm hesitant to ask about how they convey sense. I wonder if there's anything that ever goes more in depth into that. That would be really interesting.
The Geth are a humanoid race of networked AIs. They were created by the Quarians 300 years ago as tools of labor and war. When the Geth showed signs of self-evolution, the Quarians attempted to exterminate them. The Geth won the resulting war. This example has led to legal, systematic repression of artificial intelligences in galactic society. The Geth possess a unique distributed intelligence. An individual has rudimentary animal instincts, but as their numbers and proximity increase, the apparent intelligence of each individual improves. In groups, they can reason, analyze situations, and use tactics, as well as any organic race. Geth space is located at the trailing end of the Perseus Arm, beyond the lawless Terminus systems. The Perseus Veil, an obscuring dark nebula of opaque gas and dust, lies between their space and the Terminus systems.
One thing that's surprising to me is how recent a lot of these races have really come about or become more relevant. Like, these guys were only created 300 years ago. We just learned about this with Tali, who is a Quarian, and she was telling us about how her people created them and about their uprise and all that. So it's really cool to see that some of this is very recent in terms of like space-time. 300 years ago is like very soon.
The Hanar are a citadel species known for excessive politeness. They speak with scrupulous precision and take offense at improper language. Hanar that expect to deal with other species take special courses to help them unlearn their tendency to take offense at improper speech. All Hanar have 2 names. The face name is known to the world. The soul name is kept for use among close friends and relations. Hanar never refer to themselves in the first person in conversation with someone they know on a face name basis. To do so is considered egotistical, so instead they refer to themselves as this one, or the impersonal it. Their homeworld, Kaje, has 90% ocean cover and orbits an energetic white star, resulting in a permanent blanket of cloud. Due to the presence of Prothean ruins on the world, many Hanar worship them, and Hanar myths often speak of an elder race that civilized them by teaching them language.
This is really funny here. Take special courses to help them unlearn their tendency to take offense at improper speech. I have friends that are like that. I think I have Hanar friends. It's really bizarre. And now I can finally tell them what I think.
When the Asari discovered the Citadel, they also discovered the Keepers, a docile, multi-limbed insect race that seemingly exists only to maintain and repair the Great Prothean Station. Early attempts to communicate with or study the Keepers were failures, and it is now illegal to interfere with or impede Keeper activity. Because they are completely non-threatening, Keepers have become virtually invisible to everyone else. Similarly, they seem indifferent to other species, except for their tendency to help new arrivals integrate themselves into the Citadel. No matter how many keepers die due to old age, violence, or accident, they maintain a constant number. No one has discovered the source of new keepers, but some hypothesize they are genetic constructs, biological androids created somewhere deep in the inaccessible core of the Citadel itself.
There's a lot of talk about these keepers, and I'm almost like, are these guys gonna come back to be like, oh, we were running the whole thing? They're obviously very old, but it seems like, I don't know, it's really bizarre. Why? And I don't know anything about these guys, and neither does anybody else, so we're just gonna move on.
The Krogan evolved in a hostile and vicious environment. Until the invention of gunpowder weapons, eaten by predators was still the #1 cause of Krogan fatalities. Afterwards, it was death by gunshot. When the Solarians discovered them, the Krogan were a brutal, primitive species, struggling to survive a self-inflicted nuclear winter. The Solarians culturally uplifted them, teaching them to use and build modern technology, so they could serve as soldiers in the Rachni War. Liberated from the harsh conditions of their homeworld, the quick-breeding Krogan experienced an unprecedented population explosion. They began to colonize nearby worlds, even though these worlds were already inhabited. The Krogan rebellions lasted nearly a century, only ending when the Turians unleashed the Genophage, a Solarian-developed bioweapon that crushed all Krogan resistance. The Genophage makes only 1 in 1,000 pregnancies viable, and today the Krogan are a slowly dying breed. Understandably, the Krogan harbor a grudge against all other species, especially the Turians.
I find this Genophage extremely fascinating. So these Turians, I guess they worked with the Solarians, because the Solarians developed this weapon, and then Turians basically delivered it. How they delivered it, I'm not exactly sure, but it's something that has infected all these Krogan, and even the 1 in 1,000 pregnancies, that one birth must still be affected by the virus somehow. So it's something that's genetically passed on too, and so over time these guys are going to just be extinct, and like quickly, I imagine. I don't know what their population is like now, but any race that can only survive 1 in 1,000 pregnancies is not going to last very long. But I do think that if they're only focused on being upset at the Turians, that some of that might be a little bit misdirected, because the Solarians are equally as involved, if not more. But perhaps, did the Solarians develop this just to go against the Krogan? I don't know. I think there's probably more in here about the Genophage, so that might give us some info.
Driven from their home system by the Geth nearly 3 centuries ago, most Quarians now live aboard the Migrant Fleet, a flotilla of 50,000 vessels ranging in size from passenger shuttles to mobile space stations. Home to 17 million Quarians, the flotilla understandably has scarce resources. Because of this, each Quarian must go on a rite of passage known as the pilgrimage when they come of age. They leave the fleet and only return once they have found something of value they can bring back to their people. Other species tend to look down on the Quarians for creating the Geth and for the negative impact their fleet has when it enters a system. This has led to many myths and rumors about the Quarians, including the belief that underneath their clothes and breathing masks, they are actually cybernetic creatures, a combination of organic and synthetic parts.
What I thought was interesting that Tally was sharing with us is that you bring the something of value back to like another ship's head guy, and then they determine whether it's acceptable or not. And she said most of the time, like almost all the time, they just accept it because it's more of a, it's just become more of a cultural thing, less of like an actual necessity. And I think more in the past, they actually had to bring something really valuable back to like help their overall population, whereas now it's just more of a commodity in a sense.
The Volus are a member species of the Citadel with their own embassy, but they are also a client race of the Turians. Centuries ago, they were voluntarily absorbed into the hierarchy, effectively trading their mercantile prowess for Turian military protection. Erun, their homeworld, lies far beyond the normal life zone of its star. However, the world has a high-pressure greenhouse atmosphere that traps enough heat to support an ammonia-based biochemistry. As a result, The Volus must wear pressure suits and breathers when dealing with other species, as conventional nitrogen-oxygen-air mixtures are poisonous to them, and in the low-pressure atmospheres tolerable to most species, their flesh will actually split open. Volus culture is tribal, bartering lands and even people to gain status. This culture of exchange inclines them to economic pursuits. It was the Volus who authored the Unified Banking Act, and they continue to monitor and balance the Citadel economy.
These little guys are interesting. I do like them, just from like an observer, but I don't know, they don't seem very trustworthy. And like the one Volus guy that we ran into, he was working with this shadow broker guy. He trades like what, I don't remember exactly, but there was other people talking about him, and he just seems sketchy overall.
After the Geths secure a location, they round up and impale dead and living bodies on mechanical spikes. The spikes rapidly transform these victims into withered husks, extracting water and trace minerals, and replacing them with cybernetics. The cybernetics reanimate the lifeless flesh and tissue, transforming the bodies into mindless killing machines. Some Alliance soldiers refer to the husk-generating spikes as dragon's teeth, a reference to the mythological berserkers who sprang up from the earth wherever the teeth of the dragon Eris were planted. Dragon's teeth and husks bear little resemblance to other pieces of Geth technology. No one is sure why a synthetic race would bother to drain the minuscule amount of recoverable resources from organic corpses, though the value of reusing them as shock troops is obvious.
Yeah, I think we saw one of these on Eden Prime. Or maybe we saw more. I think most of them were Geth, and then towards the end of Eden Prime, I thought we saw a husk. We saw and killed a husk. What I'm going to do is jump over to the secondary options now and go through some of these. The tutorials, I'm just going to get rid of, just so that they're not highlighted. That's all good. Personal history summary. Let's read through this again. I've read this once, but just to refresh. So, born into a naval family, you spent your childhood on ships and stations. You moved from posting to posting as your parents were reassigned, and it was only natural you would follow in their footsteps by enlisting in the Alliance military when you came of age. After several years of service, you joined the campaign to rid the Skillian Verge of Batarian slavers and other criminal elements. The final battle came when Alliance forces laid siege to Torfin, a slaver base built miles below the surface of a desolate moon. The superiority of the human fleet was wasted in the assault on the underground bunker, but you led a corps of... Is that... Okay, CORPS. Is that corpse or core? I think it's core. Of elite ground troops into the heart of the enemy base. Nearly 3/4 of your own squad perished in the vicious close quarters fighting, a cost you were willing to pay to make sure not a single slaver made it out of Torfin alive. So, just to recap, rid the Skillian Verge, Batarian slave. Okay, so they are the Batarians, other criminal elements. Laid siege to Torfin, that's the slaver base on this below the surface of a desolate moon. Yeah, cool. Okay. Here's the Genophage. Perfect. The Genophage bioweapon was created to end the Krogan rebellions. From the start, the Krogan had overwhelmed the Council. Only timely first contact with the Turians saved the Council races. The Turians fought the Krogan to a standstill, but sheer weight of Krogan numbers indicated the war could not be won through conventional means. The Turians collaborated with the Solarians to genetically engineer a counter to the rapid breeding of the Krogan. So they did work together with them specifically to do this. The Genophage virus gained the energy to replicate by eating key genetic sequences. Every cell in every Krogan had to be altered for the weapon to be foolproof, otherwise the Krogan could have used gene therapy to fix the affected tissues. Once a Genophage strain could find no more genes to eat, it would starve and die, limiting spin-off mutation and contamination. This created genetic flaw is hereditary, so it is passed on to those 1 in 1,000. The Solarians believe the Genophage would be used as a deterrent, a position the Turians viewed as naive. Interesting. Once the project was complete, the Turians mass-produced and deployed it. The Krogan homeworld, their colonies, and all occupied worlds were infected. The resulting mutation made only 1 in 1,000 Krogan pregnancies carry to term. It did not reduce fertility, but offspring viability. Okay. That's even worse. The rare females able to carry children to term became prizes the Krogan warlords fought brutal battles over. It did not reduce fertility, but offspring viability. So it's just like, if you became pregnant, which seems like it's fine, it's just the chance that your unborn Krogan is going to survive is 1 in 1,000. So you're going to have lots of stillbirths and all kind of stuff. But if you carry to term, so carry all the way to birth, then you became prizes the Krogan warlords fought battles over. Okay. The Krogan are a shadow of their former glory. While the rebellions took place centuries ago, they are constantly reminded of the horror of the genophage and of their inability to counter it. The release of the genophage is still controversial, bitterly debated in many circles. Well, for obvious reason. And now this was all to stop, this was all done to stop the Krogan rebellions. So let's read about that. So after the Rachni War, have we learned about this? We heard about the Rachni, obviously, but I'm just seeing if we knew more about the Rachni War. After the Rachni War, the quick-breeding Krogan expanded at the expense of their neighbors. Warlords leveraged their veteran soldiers to seize living space while the council races were still grateful. Over centuries, the Krogan conquered world after world. There was always just one more needed. When the council finally demanded withdrawal from the Asari colony of Lucia, Krogan overlord CODEX stormed off the citadel, daring the council to take their worlds back. But the council had taken precautions. The finest STG operators and Asari huntresses had been drafted into a covert observation force, the Office of Special Tactics and Reconnaissance. The Spectres opened the war with crippling strategic strikes. Krogan planets went dark as computer viruses flooded the extranet. Sabotaged antimatter refineries disappeared in blue-white annihilation. Headquarters stations shattered into orbit-clogging debris, rammed by pre-placed suicide freighters. That's crazy. Sorry, Huntress had been drafted into... Okay. Still, this only delayed the inevitable. The war would have been lost if not for first contact with the Turians, who responded to Krogan threats with a prompt declaration of war. Being on the far side of Krogan space from the Council, the Turians advanced rapidly into the lightly defended Krogan rear areas. The Krogan responded by dropping space stations and asteroids on Turian colonies. 3 worlds were rendered completely uninhabitable. This was precisely the wrong approach to take with the Turians. Each is first and foremost a public servant willing to risk his life to protect his comrades. Rather than increasing public war weariness, Krogan tactics stiffened Turian resolve. The arrival of Turian task forces saved many worlds from the warlords' marauding fleets, but it took development of the genophage bioweapon to end the war. There were decades of unrest afterwards. Rogue warlords and holdout groups of insurgents refused to surrender or disappeared into the frontier systems to become pirates. Okay. Now we're going to learn a lot about Quarians. The Migrant Fleet has little economic base, operating in the state of perpetual hand-to-mouth. While Quarian ships include light manufacturing and assembly plants, they lack heavy industries such as refining and shipbuilding. The fleet has tankers for water purification and oxygen cracking, but the space-intensive nature of the agriculture limits food production. A single disaster could destroy the fragile balance. The Quarians earn income in creative ways. Because the government is obliged to provide food, water, air, and medical support for every individual, the Conclave strategically determines the course of the fleet to bring in resources and income. A species who suspects the Migrant Fleet is heading towards their space often offers a gift of surplus starships, fuel, and resources to convince the Conclave to alter course. Okay, that's interesting. As the fleet passes through a system, swarms of mining vessels work over asteroids for metals and siliceous materials and cometary bodies for water, ice, and organics. Quarian miners are adept at locating and strip mining spaceborne resources. This sparks conflict with corporations already working the system. Large mining concerns spend millions on lobbyists and public relations portraying the Quarians as locusts, devouring the resources of a system before moving on. The greatest asset of the Quarians is their rarefied skills. Most are experienced miners. Due to their life of perpetual salvage and repair, they are skilled engineers and technicians. More than once, the very corporations that lobby against the Quarians have made backroom deals with the fleet, arranging for skilled Quarians to fill space engineering jobs that other species would demand higher wages for. Quarians are widely hated among the working class. The Quarians are coming to take our jobs is a common response to the fleet's approach. So I could make some very obvious comparisons to especially American economies and how they treat certain workers, but I'll leave that out. But this is really interesting. These Quarians, I don't know, they seem really cool. What is weird is what, like, underneath these suits, they, what are they exactly? They almost remind me of like bubble people, like people that live in bubbles, because they must get sick really easily and stuff. Have I heard that already? Or am I just speculating? I'm not sure. Due to the Quarians' precarious existence and the need to enforce strict rationing, government is somewhat autocratic. The Migrant Fleet's operations are directed by the Admiralty, a board of 5 military officers who are advised by a legislative body called the Conclave. Right, okay. So each vessel, and we learned a little bit about this as well, each vessel in the fleet has the right to send representatives to the Conclave aboard the flagship. The number of representatives is based on crew size. Larger clans with bigger ships and more votes form the cores of political blocs. Opposition comes from the Outriders Coalition, which with delegates from thousands of smaller ships. The Admiralty defers to the Conclave's decisions in most circumstances. However, if all 5 members agree that a Conclave decision jeopardizes the survival of the fleet and cannot get the Conclave to address their concerns, they have the right to summarily overturn the legislative decision. This is where it's interesting. After the Admiralty uses this extraordinary power, they must resign. So all 5 of them, if they agree this is going to hurt the fleet, then they can overturn the decision, but then they're gone. They're out of the Admiralty. If the Admiralty does not step down after using their veto, the rest of the military is obliged to arrest them. Each ship captain has authority over his vessel, but is advised by an elected civilian council, just as the Admiralty is advised by the Conclave. This relationship may range from cooperation to polite tolerance to outright hostility, but any captain who overrules his council without good reason is relieved of command by the Admiralty. There's a lot of systems in place. Many Quarian ships are owned by clans who pool their resources to purchase used vessels from private sellers. Large ships are prestigious for big, rich clans, but a small ship means status for a small clan with enough personal wealth to afford a private vessel. Okay. Class vessel captains are not subject to dismissal by the Admiralty. Abusive captains are a family problem if they do not disrupt the operations of the fleet. Very cool. And this is what I was talking about before, where the Quarians will probably be more in the pilgrimage too, but they bring that gift to another vessel, right? And to present to the leader of that vessel, to the leader of that vessel, so that they can join. And yeah. The Migrant Fleet is the largest concentration of star-faring vessels in the galaxy, sprawling across millions of kilometers. It can take days for the entire fleet to pass through a mass relay. When the Quarians fled their homeworld, the fleet was a motley aggregation of freighters, shuttles, industrial vessels, and the odd warship. After 3 centuries, all have been modified to support larger crews as comfortably as possible. As the Quarians achieved stability, they began weeding out the ships least suitable for long-term habitation, selling them and pooling the money to buy larger and more space-worthy hulls. This process is ongoing, and as vessels wear out and break down. While some ships enjoy dedicated cabins with full privacy and sanitary facilities, many more are former freighters whose cargo bays and containers are pressurized and divided into family spaces using simple metal cubicle bulkheads. The Quarians enliven these austere spaces with colorful quilts and tapestries, which also help muffle sound. The day-to-day operations of the fleet, traffic control, station keeping, supply distribution, and so on are under military jurisdiction. Though ship captains have the authority to deviate from their assigned positions and may leave the fleet at any time, they're assumed to do so at their own risk. As the Migrant Fleet moves around the galaxy, many ships split off to pursue individual goals, returning days or years later. And then this is the pilgrimage. So, when Quarians of the Migrant Fleet reach young adulthood, so I would assume this is like anywhere between kind of 16 to 18 our age. I don't know if they age differently or whatever, but that's kind of what I picture young adulthood. I don't know. They must leave their birth ship and find a new crew to accept them as permanent residents. To prove themselves, they must recover something of value. This is offered to their prospective captain as proof that they will not be a mere burden on the shoestring resources of the ship. This process is called the pilgrimage. Stripped of ritual, the pilgrimage is merely an attempt to maintain genetic diversity within the small, relatively isolated population bases that make up the Migrant Fleet. If the young stayed and married within their birth vessel, the risk of inbreeding would increase sharply. Quarians are surgically fitted with their various immunity-boosting implants in preparation for leaving on pilgrimage. Having grown up within the sterile, controlled environments of the Migrant Fleet ships, Quarians have virtually no natural immune system, and I do think that Tally explained that to us already. So, really cool. Alright, that's going to be the first part of the Codex entries. I'm going to take a little break, and then when we come back, we will also cover off the remainder of the primary and secondary Codex entries. And then that way, as the series progresses, these are things that I could either do in separate videos or just add to existing videos, and it gives me a chance to like talk to you guys directly. A lot of times when I play games, I'll ask you guys questions and stuff. If I'm trying to do from a roleplay perspective, I probably won't ask questions as often because that wouldn't make as much sense. So this is a good break for that stuff. But thank you guys, and if you have any clarifying points that you'd like to add for any of the entries that we saw, I would love to hear them. And thank you so much for the support in this series. It's an old game. I'm actually really enjoying it. Some people have said like they've reinstalled Mass Effect and stuff, and that's really cool. And I hope that you guys are enjoying the series, just watching it if you aren't playing it. But for me, I'm having a ton of fun. As I said, when I played this through the very first time, like many years ago, I just looked at it like a shooter. Like I'd go through and kill aliens, whatever. I'd skip stuff. My brother would play. We'd swap. It was like I didn't really focus on the story, and I realized how much I've missed. A lot. And this is really cool. This codex is super detailed. I'm actually surprised how much is in here, but really interesting nonetheless. So we'll see you guys in Codex Part 2 very soon. Thanks, bye.